Balakrishnan and Ilyas Suleiman, you are both here today to be sentenced, having been convicted by the jury on the 6th of March of the murder of 16-year-old Rishmeet Singh. You may remain seated until I tell you to stand up. You, Mr. Balakrishnan, are also here for an offence of causing grievous bodily harm with intent, contrary to Section 18 of the Offences Against the Person Act, which was committed by you on the 1st of July of 2022 while you were on remand at Feltham Young Offender Institution. I'm going to call that the Section 18 offence. You pleaded guilty to that offence on the 10th of March of this year. This case is yet another tragic example of the needless loss of a young teenager's life following a violent stabbing on the streets of London. This case is the more tragic because Rishmeet was an entirely innocent victim. At your trial, all who knew Rishmeet spoke very fondly of him. He was described by friends as a good person who would not harm a fly, as pure of heart and a humble guy. He wouldn't get into a beef with anyone. He was never involved in any kind of violence. He had no convictions or cautions. He did not drink alcohol or take drugs. And it defies belief that you two sought him out to kill him. The impact of his death at your hands cannot be overstated. In her victim personal statement, his mother, Mrs. Kaur, tells a heart-rending story. In 2019, she came to the UK with her mother and her only child, Rishmeet, as asylum seekers from Afghanistan. Rishmeet's father had been killed by the Taliban. The Taliban had tried to kidnap Rishmeet and convert him to Islam. As Sikhs, the local Gurdwara helped them escape. They came here to seek a safe life. Neither she nor her mother speak good English. They were reliant upon Rishmeet for communication. Rishmeet was his mother's carer, as she is disabled by polio. They moved to Southall to be closer to an Afghan Sikh community. With hindsight, that decision to move will haunt Rishmeet's mother and grandmother for the rest of their lives. With Rishmeet's help, they obtained a flat. He was a vital and invaluable conduit in all administrative tasks. Rishmeet showed all the signs of growing into a valued member of society. He hoped to become a police officer. Against that background, with hope for a peaceful future and a productive and rewarding life for her son, Mrs. Kaur describes her loss following her son's murder. She cannot put into words the impact upon herself and Rishmeet's grandmother. She says, "I have lost everything and my life is over. I will never get over losing him in this way." She will not see him grow up and fulfill his aspirations. He had his whole future ahead of him. His mother now feels lonely and isolated. 16 months since Rishmeet's death and her pain has not subsided. She's on medication for depression. Her mother too is devastated at the loss of her grandson. Your actions have left those two women entirely bereft, with no male figure in their lives, in a country where they don't speak the language, a country where they sought refuge from a violent regime, only to face the ultimate loss as a result of what you two did. Nothing I can do or say today can bring Rishmeet back or relieve the pain your actions have caused.
Buckle up, guys. Today we are going to witness a sentencing that feels heavier with every word. The judge begins by naming the crime, the murder of 16-year-old Rishmeet Singh. What follows is heartbreaking. An innocent refugee teen described as kind, disciplined and full of dreams was the sole support for his disabled mother and grandmother. They fled violence for safety, only to lose everything on a London street.
No term of years will be sufficient punishment so far as his mother and grandmother are concerned. No term of years can even begin to compensate them. You two are very close friends. You were both 17 in November 2021 when you committed the murder. From about September 2020, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, started hanging around in Hayes, and there you met older Hayes Town gang members and quickly became involved in the gang culture. You saw their expensive clothes and their postings of gang signs, and you were attracted by the scene. You were initially sucked in by the offer of free cannabis, but you ran up debts and were forced to deal Class A drugs as a result. It is an all too familiar picture in this court. A safe house at 68 Austin Road was used as a base by the gang to store drugs and weapons. On the 21st of January of 2021, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, was stopped by police and found to be in possession of a lethal knife. You received a referral order and were allocated a social worker who taught you the dangers of knife crime. On the 11th of June of the same year, you were stopped by police and found in possession of heroin, crack cocaine, cash and 2 phones. By then, you were involved in the regular drug dealing for which you were paid considerable sums of money. You, Mr. Suleiman, got to know gang members through Mr. Balakrishnan. You have no previous convictions, and people who know you speak very highly of you. However, you too were given cannabis and became a regular user. I am of the firm view that by the time of the murder, you too were an enthusiastic gang member who was willing to join in with the nefarious activities of the Hayes Town gang. I note that your half-sister confirms my view. The two of you would go to the Austin Road estate every day where you'd hang out with other gang members and smoke cannabis. On the 19th of November 2021, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, purchased a large Rambo-style machete from the internet sites with which this court is very familiar, and from which such knives, for which there is no legitimate use, can be bought with impunity. The knife you bought was similar to the one which the police had taken from you earlier in the year. The 24th of November 2021 was the day of the murder. Rishmeet Singh was socialising with his friends. They were not drinking alcohol or taking drugs. He was not armed. CCTV showed the two of you leaving 68 Austin Road at 8:47 p.m, having changed from the clothes that you were wearing earlier. You, Mr. Suleiman, had a particularly large 3-foot-long machete-style knife concealed in your tracksuit trousers. You, Mr. Balakrishnan, either took the knife, which you had purchased with you from number 68, or you collected it from a stash by the canal en route to the rival territory. You were each riding a bicycle. You identified Rishmeet and his friends as potential targets, and you began to chase them. By chance, a BMW was in the area, which may well have contained gang rivals, and interaction between you and the occupants of that car may have led you wrongly to associate Rishmeet and his friends with a Southall gang. The two of you approached Rishmeet's group in a threatening manner. His friends were able to escape.
The court then turns to how two teenagers drifted deep into gang culture, drawn by money, status and drugs. As observers hear about knives, safe houses and planned movements into rival territory, the picture sharpens. On the night of the attack, both defendants armed themselves with machete-style blades, changed clothes and rode out on bikes. CCTV shows them selecting targets, chasing the group and closing in.
But Rishmeet ran off on his own, and when he tripped over, the CCTV showed that the two of you ferociously attacked him, each of you stabbing him repeatedly with those lethal knives. You, Mr. Balakrishnan, made 5 separate stabbing movements. You, Mr. Suleiman, a further 10. As Rishmeet lay dying in a doorway, you headed off, collected the bikes and rode back to number 68. There you changed your clothes and went to your respective homes by taxi. You both went back to number 68 the following day and arranged for the bikes and your blood-stained clothing to be disposed of. At the scene where Rishmeet was to die, the emergency services had been called at 9:07. He had suffered multiple sharp force injuries to his head, and chest, and penetrating injuries to his brain, liver and lung. There were through and through injuries to his arm, which were consistent with defensive injuries as he held his arms up to try to protect himself. There were at least 11 and up to 15 separate stab wounds. Despite the efforts of the medics, his injuries were not survivable, and he died at the scene. The very same night, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, having taken your blood-stained knife back to your bedroom, photographed it and posted a photograph on social media. You then wrote drill lyrics glorifying the killing, which included lines such as, "One tripped and fell, and he knew it was over. I was swinging my shank, swinging my blade back and forth, trying to turn him off. He tripped and got dipped onto my shank. Chasing him with a nank, really trying to open his chest apart, trying to push my knife through his lungs."
What happened next is described with chilling clarity. Rishmeet fell while trying to escape, and both attackers repeatedly stabbed him as he lay defenseless. He suffered catastrophic wounds and died at the scene. Afterward, they returned to base, changed clothes and destroyed evidence. One even photographed the weapon and wrote violent lyrics glorifying the killing. Arrests followed, silence in interviews, and clear attempts to evade justice.
Those chilling lyrics were found in the very notebook in which you had recorded the lessons you'd learned about the dangers of knife crime as part of your referral order. You were arrested at your home on the 2nd of December of 2021. You did not answer police questions. You, Mr. Suleiman, ran away from your home when you heard about Mr. Balakrishnan's arrest. Your mother reported you missing. You were arrested at a cousin's address on the 8th of December. You admit that you were planning to leave the country. You also did not answer police questions. You were both remanded into custody, and you, Mr. Balakrishnan, were held at Feltham Young Offender Institution. The second serious offence of violence for which I have to deal with you took place on the 1st of July 2022. That was when you were still on remand for the murder at Feltham. You and 4 other inmates, including Marcus Walker, who I sentenced yesterday, were in the exercise yard at around 10:30 in the morning. There is poor quality footage of the incident. However, several prison officers were able to describe what took place. Even after that, the attack continued. During the attack, Walker was heard to shout, "Finish him off," and this is how you put mans to sleep. Walker also said, "I had to start it, that's what you get," to which you responded repeatedly, "Rest in peace." The two of you were laughing. When he briefly regained consciousness, he begged the officers to save his life, saying, "I have a daughter." He then fell back into unconsciousness. He was taken to hospital by air ambulance. He had suffered increased pressure and bleeding to his brain, which was life-threatening. He underwent lengthy surgery, but is left with permanent and significant brain damage. His cognitive functions are badly affected, and he will require lengthy rehabilitation and ongoing long-term input from multidisciplinary teams in order to support him in reaching his full potential. I then turn to the approach to sentence. In relation to the murder, you are both now 18, you were both 17 at the date of the murder. As you both know, the sentence for murder is fixed by law, and I must pass a life sentence upon you both. Due to the fact that you were under 18 when the murder was committed, the sentence is one of detention at His Majesty's pleasure. I have to set the minimum term that you must each serve before you can be considered for release by the parole board. I begin by identifying the appropriate starting point under paragraph 5A of Schedule 21 of the Sentencing Act 2020, as amended by Section 127 of the Police Crime and Sentencing and Courts Act 2022. Because you each took a knife to the scene and had it with you intending to use it, as you in fact did, the starting point is now one of 23 years. I observe that the starting point for a 16-year-old is 6 years lower, namely 17 years. That was in fact the starting point I took in the case of Walker, who I sentenced for a different murder yesterday. The aggravating factors are these. 1, in your case, Mr. Balakrishnan, your previous conviction for possession of a knife. 2, in both your cases, that you planned the offence, you changed your clothing, disguised your faces, and travelled to rival gang territory with the sole purpose of attacking members of a rival gang. You, Mr. Balakrishnan, put your phone onto flight mode, and you, Mr. Suleiman, gave your phone to another gang member so that it could be used to lay a false trail. 3, this was gang-related offending. 4, you both took steps to avoid being connected to the murder. You disposed of your clothing and arranged for the bicycles to be discarded. 5, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, posted that picture of one of the murder weapons onto social media and glorified your actions in sickening drill lyrics. Finally, you, Mr. Suleiman, got rid of your phone, went to ground and planned to flee the country. You also changed your appearance. Turning to mitigation. In your case, Mr. Balakrishnan, having heard you give evidence and read reports upon you, I regard the following as mitigating factors. 1, your immaturity. Whilst your chronological age is reflected in the reduction of the starting point for the minimum term from 25 years for an adult down to 23 years, I also need to consider the case law, which emphasises that a person's actual maturity may be different from that to be expected at their age. You are described in reports as young for your age. You have limited intellectual functioning and emotional intelligence. Secondly, you have been found to have been a victim of modern slavery. Thirdly, you have a lack of formal positive structure or role models in your life. And fourthly, you are susceptible to pressure from others. Your psychological profile suggested that you took a notably passive role in relationships and depended on others for guidance. And you have reduced intellectual functioning. In your case, Mr. Suleiman, whilst there are no reports, I heard you give evidence also, and I have read the numerous testimonials. I take the following factors into account in your favour: your lack of convictions, your immaturity and susceptibility to pressure as a result of wanting to fit in. Thirdly, the lack of a stable home structure at a crucial time in your life. And fourthly, the obviously positive character traits described by the character witnesses.
The narrative grows darker inside custody. While on remand, one defendant joined a group assault on another inmate, leaving the victim with life-threatening brain injuries. The judge then explains the legal framework. Life sentences are mandatory for murder. Aggravating factors stack up: planning, gang motive, disguises, weapon use, and efforts to cover tracks, while mitigation includes youth, immaturity, and vulnerability to influence.
None who know you can believe that you got yourself involved in this most serious offence. The complementary adjectives used to describe the young man who those people describe are all totally opposite of the young man who made the decision to go out with a huge knife and inflict misery upon others by killing a 16-year-old child. Sadly, you threw away all that good when you made that decision. I note the realistic assessment by your older sister, who observed a deterioration and a change in you. She saw you getting embroiled into the gang culture and running drugs for the gang leaders for about 4 months prior to the murder. Balancing the aggravating and mitigating factors in each of your cases, I see no reason to make any distinction between the two of you in relation to the murder. Having balanced the competing factors, I have come to the conclusion that the appropriate minimum term in each of your cases for the murder is 21 years. In your case, Mr. Balakrishnan, the minimum term must be increased to reflect the Section 18 offence. The group attack upon a fellow inmate involved significant planning. It was a revenge attack upon a youth who your group perceived to be a snitch. The victim suffered particularly grave and life-threatening injury. That offence fell within Category 1A of the relevant guideline, with a starting point for an adult of 12 years and a range of 10 to 16 years. There are a number of aggravating factors. 1, the fact that this was an attack within a custodial setting. 2, the fact that you were on remand, having pleaded not guilty to Rishmeet's murder. And 3, your previous conviction. The mitigating factors are those which I have set out above in relation to the murder. I do not repeat them. In relation to this offence, the mitigating factors balance out the aggravating factors. I emphasise that I have guarded against any double counting and borne firmly in mind the youth guideline, the guideline relating to mentally disordered offenders, and totality. You were days away from your 18th birthday when you committed that Section 18 offence. However, your role in the offence was slightly less significant than that of Walker, and accordingly, the same sentence is merited as that which I identified in his case. That is a sentence before plea of 8 years detention. You were originally charged with attempted murder, to which you pleaded not guilty. You entered a plea to the Section 18 offence on the 10th of March of 2023. Your trial had been listed for July of this year. You deserve 25% credit for your plea, which gives a term of 6 years. Whilst the sentence for the Section 18 will be imposed concurrently, that offence will be reflected, as I have said, in the increased minimum term attached to the murder sentence. I then have to consider dangerousness. In your case, I am of the firm view that despite your youth and the other matters to which I have referred, on all the facts of this case, you do present a significant risk of serious harm to the public, occasioned by the commission by you of further specified offences. The author of the pre-sentence report is of the same view. In my judgment, acknowledging that a life sentence is a last resort, the Section 18 offence is in itself serious enough to justify a life sentence, and there is no reliable estimate of the length of time you will remain a danger. In any event, of course, you will be serving the life sentence which I'm about to impose for the murder of Rishmeet. Would you both stand up, please? The sentences I pass upon you are as follows. Vanushan Balakrishnan, for the murder, detention at His Majesty's pleasure with a minimum term of 24 years. For the Section 18, detention at His Majesty's pleasure with a minimum term of 4 years. That's 2/3 of the notional determinate term. You have spent 524 days in detention on remand, which will count towards your sentence. So the minimum term is 24 years less 524 days. Ilyas Suleiman, the sentence I pass upon you for the murder is detention at His Majesty's pleasure with a minimum term of 21 years. You have spent 517 days in detention on remand, which will count towards your sentence. And so the minimum term is 21 years less 517 days. If the information which I've been provided with as to days in detention on remand proves to be inaccurate, then the prosecution or defence must notify the court so that the case can be relisted to correct the calculation as soon as possible, and in any event within 56 days of today. You must both understand, and all those who are listening must understand, that you will not be released when you have served those minimum terms. Indeed, you will only be released if and when the parole board conclude that either or both of you no longer pose a risk of harm to the public, and that will not be until you have served at least every day of the minimum terms which I have just imposed. That's the sentence of the court.
Balancing everything, the judge sets minimum terms, 21 years for one, 24 for the other due to the additional violent offence. Time already served is deducted, but the warning is clear. Release is not automatic. Only the parole board can decide, and only if the risk to the public is gone. The court closes on that stark reality of consequence. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.